Dr. Brian White here, superintendent at Chartiers Valley, is going to introduce us. He's going to have to run. He's got a board meeting tonight, and so thanks for having us here, Dr. White, and please take it away.
Good evening. It wasn't just a board meeting. Unfortunately, I've been in and out of a voice for the last week, so I apologize for not having long remarks. But thank you for coming out, and GBA has been a great partner with Chartiers Valley. About 4 years ago, we got involved in the Green Schools Academy, and it's a 2-year cohort program that allowed us to put a team of teachers, students, our facilities director, our business manager, and administrators in to look at aspects of school operations, not from a going green perspective, but really a sustainability, a high and healthy performing schools perspective. And we looked at a lot of things: air quality, what we do in our cafeterias, how we manage our energy, what is our landscaping, how does that impact our school environment. And through that, there was about 10 other schools, and they weren't all school districts. Some were charter schools, some were private schools. We grew a really great network of people to share ideas about the future of learning and what's best for kids. And we got to visit some pretty cool places and talk to some really world-renowned people as part of that program that really challenged our thinking, which led into the project you're going to hear about tonight, which did not start as a comprehensive renovation or new school project. I really didn't want to do construction at all because it's quite a diversion from learning. We started off by talking to ESCO companies about retrofitting our univentilators, our lighting system, our heating and cooling, and talking about what do we need to do to bring this building up to speed a little bit, because we had a lot of disruptions. We still do have a lot of disruptions with the infrastructure in the building and how it impacts learning. One year we had 3 evacuations, 2 electrocutions, 1 small fire. That was just in a 1-year time span. So it was really, we were really hitting pretty good there. And really that morphed into understanding more and more about the infrastructure of the building was not salvageable without paying an incredible premium for it. And that led to a comprehensive facility study, which led eventually to the process you're going to hear tonight, which involved our school design advisory teams, our community, really becoming engaged about talking what learning should look like in our community and what resources we need to have in place for effective learning, and how much we're paying to keep this building alive. Our utility bills as a district are a little bit over 1.6 to 1.8 million a year, and this building is the main consumer of those resources. So what I hope you take away from tonight, as much as I appreciate the design team, they've done a wonderful job, it isn't the blocks and the drawings and the pictures, because they are great and we're really proud of them. But I hope you take away is process and finding a way to hear what your teachers, principals, community want and need to be successful. Because ultimately, your building is going to look different than this one, the one we're in and the one we're building, and that's okay, because it should look different. It should match the needs of your community. And that engagement process really has been a powerful piece for us. We had our Act 34 hearing. Our hard construction costs are $78.5 million, a total project cost of about $88-90 million. We had not one negative comment at our Act 34 hearing. Every comment was positive in support of the project. So I hope those of you heading down that road have the same kind of success and find that same kind of support in your endeavors as well. So that I don't know who's going first, Andrew, Matt, and Kara, so I'll step out of the way, and thank you.
Thanks, Dr. White. Okay, so just to give you an idea of what's going to happen, I'm going to talk for a little bit, just pretty high level, about what we do at the Green and Healthy Schools Academy, which is an initiative of the Green Building Alliance. Matt Hansen from IKM and Kara Droney, also from Chartiers Valley, are going to kind of tag team a little bit on talking about the process that Dr. White referred to, sort of get into the details of how that unfolded and why we think it's unique and exceptional. Subsequently, we're going to have a hard hat tour. For those of you that are interested, it is a little bit early in the project, and we kind of did it by design, so we weren't in a hard hat tour in an inch of snow and blowing wind. So we're going to pick a couple of places to stop by, but it's not going to be necessarily the rich experience of a nearly complete building. But we wanted to give the opportunity, since this is a building-related project, and we do have the opportunity to go out here on the site. So that's kind of immediately subsequent to our presentations. This should be hopefully interactive, so feel free to ask questions at any point. So as I said, I'm with the Green and Healthy Schools Academy. I'm also representing Jenna Kramer, who's been with Green Building Alliance and really founded the Green and Healthy Schools Academy about 5 years ago. Jenna unfortunately has a family emergency and wasn't able to join, but it's really been her vision that has created the program that Dr. White referred to and all the opportunities that have come out as a result of it. So I think our mission is pretty simple. You know, we believe that children deserve to be in places that are healthy and high-performing, as well as inspiring and engaging, that it's not just about the building, but it's the opportunity, it's the human experience for kids to live better lives, to learn something new, and to be exposed at a level that's going to take them into the future. Here are our programs. The one that Dr. White referred to was actually the School Sustainability Culture Program. Some of you picked up that handout, which is over there, that really goes into that in a little more detail. Some of you may have heard of our Inspire Speaker Series, which brings nationally renowned speakers on different topics of sustainability to our region, really in the interest of daring people to dream about what's possible and what's happening out there, not necessarily being confined to the knowledge and the projects we have here in this region. One of the activities that I work on primarily is the Healthy Schools Technical Assistance in promoting healthy and safe environments with no-cost, low-cost efforts to ensure good air quality, good ventilation, green cleaning, things of that like. And we're always pleased to be here at Chartiers Valley as a model of that. We've recently added a new staff person who's very versed in creating innovative learning experiences, and so we have what we call our Innovative Learning Lab, is really giving students real-world opportunities to see what sustainability looks like in their communities, in their schools, and really engage in that in a really thoughtful way. So that's how these tend to structure. So these buckets I'll talk to in a second. Environmental impact in place in terms of energy, waste, water, transportation, healthy environments and lifestyles is partly what I referred to in terms of our safe and healthy environments, but also overall student and staff wellness. And then our Innovative Learning Lab, we think, is our opportunity to integrate environmental education and foster community engagement. This culture piece is really the differentiator, though. This model is out there. It's in the form of what's called Green Ribbon Schools. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. That's a program of the U.S. Department of Education based on the Blue Ribbon Schools model that rewards schools for excelling in these three pillars or areas that we essentially have aligned with. I'll jump back to that. But what Jenna arrived at when she started the Green Schools Academy, which is what it was called back in 2012, is that there was always something missing. You know, these became a set of strategies and ideas and best practices that you could implement, but there seemed to be a disconnect of why this mattered, you know, what this all added up to. And so she launched the School Sustainability Culture Program, which ties in with the Inspired Speaker Series, as a way of exploring these big picture ideas and understanding what opportunities are for schools to integrate sustainability and to see themselves actually education and sustainability truly being aligned. And to start to explore what the values of that are and what the vision and the purpose of the school is. It's not about how to recycle and how to do green cleaning and where you can get grants to do renewable energy. Not that that's not important, but what we realize is we have to have that foundation of people steeped in what the values of their school are and their community are to really find themselves and see themselves in a lot of these buckets and strategies. So the Green Ribbon Schools is an excellent framework in terms of strategies and guidance. The U.S. Department of Education started to recognize that there were basically three separate initiatives or worlds that were kind of competing in a way for attention with schools. And say, you know, they're environmental people, they're the public health and environmental health people, and then they're the environmental education people. They weren't really talking. And the U.S. Department of Education said, we need all these. And all these are actually what are going to make up 21st century schools. right? And these are the things that our students need to be prepared with and equipped with to thrive and succeed in the 21st century. The question is, though, why? Why does this matter? Whoops. Oh, that is timed. I forgot. So why does this matter? And this is a question we ask a lot in not necessarily just talking about the how we get a healthy, high-performing building. Why do we want that in the first place? And what in particular about our individual school or community connects to sustainability and connects to all these ideas? What is it going to allow them to do? And in essence, it's getting to the things that we really care about and finding out what is most important to who we are. And so I come up with this idea. So by the way, these are my kids. If you've ever been in any of my presentations, I always put my kids in them because it's my constant reminder of why I do this work. But we really see the opportunity to allow children's schools and communities to reach their fullest potential. And we see so much opportunity, especially in an area where construction of a new school building is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, right? And so we want to make sure we're getting the most potential, reaching the most potential with this. And it's not really just about money, right? It's about understanding and connecting with what really is important. And so to that end, talk about the values that we espouse. We don't force these on schools. These are this is things that we do in the school sustainability culture program. We provide a space and we facilitate an opportunity for that dialogue to happen, for schools to identify the values that are important to them. These are our values. This is what drives our work. I think there's definitely some overlap with a lot of the schools that we have, but it's taking the time to identify what is most important. We work with schools in the faith community. And they have a whole different set of values, and good for them, right? And they need their school and their environment to reflect those values. This was one of the exercises that came out of one of the workshops of the culture program. We asked, what is a green and healthy school? Just allow them, this is actually towards the end of the program. And start to realize that, when you're able to have that conversation, I don't know if any of you can read this, when you're able to have that conversation about values, then all of a sudden things start to bubble up as really mattering, right? So the green facilities, that's one piece of it, and that is going to facilitate a lot of other pieces. So what are some of these other pieces? Kids as concerned citizens, right? This is about 21st century learning and connections to community and community engagement. Admin invested in doing what's best for kids. Once that's on the table, all of a sudden I think the conversation starts to change. And by the way, this is the only prompt we gave them was this. And this is basically what their exploration was. I feel obliged to talk a little bit about, LEED and Green Ribbon Schools to an extent, and kind of certifications writ large. LEED is a tool, right? And like all tools, like a hammer, for example, or Bob, where's your wrench? My coworker asked me to bring a wrench for this guy here. I don't know what he's going to do with that. It's a tool, right? It can be used well or it can be used incorrectly. And so things like LEED and these systems are not a replacement. They're not a substitute for understanding what you care about and what's important. It represents what somebody thinks is important, but at a level that becomes generic. And so we tend to see when we get things that are hung up on LEED or use LEED as the driver, for example, it lacks the level of decision-making it lacks the guidance for decision-making as to what's important and where you're going to put your money and your effort. Because if you don't have that, what you end up in a situation is you're just figuring out the least expensive way to get the most number of points. And at the end of the day, is that really what you want out of your building, right? Is to actually have the sticker on the wall. If you provide that context of what is important and what matters to your school and to your community, there's a lot of stuff in these rating systems that make a huge amount of sense. But you have to understand what that is first. I have to quote Jenna here. There was a Green Schools conference, a national scale conference that came here in last March. I think a couple people here were able to attend. And Jenna had the opportunity to offer closing remarks. And this is something I pulled out of here, which I thought was really, really got to the soul of what we're talking about. Our ability to get to a better, brighter, happier, just, and thriving future is dependent upon love of all of our children, loving each other, and of course, loving ourselves. And so this theme of love actually comes up a lot, and that's when people are saying like, whoa, in the sustainability world and environmental world, like, what are we talking about here? This is getting a little weird. And then I was at a conference last week, and this fellow's national leader in looking at public health from the built environment perspective and how a built environment is affecting our health and well-being and happiness. And this is what he said: our built environment is our policy written into concrete. And I'll take that one step farther and say, it's actually our social values which drive our policy, which then become, written into concrete. And so, I will challenge you to say, how do you take values like love and start to reflect what that actually looks like in a building? Or whatever values you identify are important. That's the challenge, I think, that we face. And I'm so excited about what they've done here at Chartiers Valley because of the fact that they started on this process that was based on a set of, it's in here somewhere, of guiding principles. Before it was about which space is going to go where and how much of this and how much of that we're going to have. What matters to us? What is going to guide our decision making? And I don't know if you have any of these to share.
Yeah, we do, and the guiding principles are part of it.
Awesome, great. I didn't even put them up. So that's what I would like you to take away from this. That's what we should have, I think, as a collective vision for our schools, is this idea that it is going to be the embodiment of what we most care about. And we have to identify, is that going to be the success of our kids, both now and later in life? That's what we think, but that's up for you all to decide. So I'll just talk a little bit more about what we've helped at Char Valley. You're going to see Bob Gold is in a lot of these pictures, the facilities director here, and that's because he's the only person over 4 years that attended every single workshop and lecture. Perfect attendance, the only person ever done it. So he's in a lot of pictures. But this is just, we had such a great experience working with Chartiers Valley and having the opportunity to, Nick Morelli, who's over here on the left in this picture, is the business manager here, and he's like, what are they really going to teach us? We know how to do this stuff. And then realizing that coming into our program, saying there's a whole new world here. There's a whole new type of conversation to have, and we're thrilled to have that. And we were not really directly involved in the purchasing and installation of their wind turbine, but we liked that was a project of theirs through the School Sustainability Culture Program. We also helped directly on this project by helping to set this project in motion in some ways, in creating some of the guiding, not the guiding principles, but helping to direct the project so it could achieve the aspirational goals that they had set out for themselves. How does this be best in class? How is this high performing? How does this take students to 21st century learning skills? Right? So we're thrilled to have been here and have worked with Chartiers Valley over the last several years. And excited for what's coming forth with this project. And we honestly see this as being a true model of the way schools can and should be built in this region and beyond. And so, I already gave you one takeaway. I'll give you one more. They're going to talk about process. And this, to us, is all about process. And this is idea of how we create a desire in the community and in the school to have this process in place that is going to create the places where student and staff can thrive and succeed. To us, that is the goal, and that is the opportunity to improve our world and to lift up so many in our community. So I'm pleased to introduce Matt Hansen and Kara Droney. Who's going first? Okay, all right. So thanks so much, and I look forward to your presentation. Any questions while I'm doing the IT thing here? And if you ever want to, my card's up there. If you ever want to email me or just have questions or want to talk or whatever, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Kara Droney. I'm the Director of Communications and Strategic Partnerships at Chartiers Valley School District. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about the process that we engaged in to get to the point in the construction process that we are now, and possibly even the process as we go forward. This is Matt Hansen. He's our lead architect from IKM, and they played a huge role in getting us to this point. So excited to talk you through that today. Okay, so first a little bit about Chartiers Valley. Dr. White mentioned that each school, as they go through this, has to individualize the process to meet their own needs, the needs of their communities and the needs of their learners. So a little bit about us. We're this red thing right here, located a suburb of Southwest Pennsylvania. We have 4 communities within our district, so it's really important to make sure that we always remember the 4 townships, Heidelberg Borough, Collier Township, Scott Township, and Bridgeville Borough. So that's something that's a little bit unique to us in some ways. Our demographics, we have approximately 3,450 students, that's K through 12, and 30% of our students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. In addition, we have a pretty high English language learner population with about 97 students that fit that category. So the strategic planning process. You've already heard a couple of times that process plays a huge role in getting to where we are, and that was something that we took very seriously here. So we wanted to make sure that this process was transparent from the start and it was open to the community from the start, and that we were meeting the needs of our community members, but most importantly our students and our teachers here at Chartiers Valley. So we started with a strategic planning, call it the strategic planning event, where we invited community members to attend. So whether you're a parent, a student, a teacher, an administrator, a school board member, or just somebody who lives in the community and is interested in learning what we have going on here, come down to this day, find out what we have going on at Chartiers Valley, and be a part of defining our future, the strategic plan that we're going to use to navigate our way for the next 5 years. So the strategic planning process is, we used some resources from the Luma Institute. They were very helpful in helping us ensure that we had human-centered design in this process. So again, going back to meeting the needs of our educators and our learners here at Chartiers Valley. We also had wonderful partners along the way. So you obviously know that they were Green Schools Alliance at the time, Green and Healthy Schools Alliance now, played a great role in really being a partner. We were in their program for 2 years. During that time, they challenged us to change how we're thinking, and they also taught us the positive impact that a truly healthy school can have on learning and the difference that that makes. So we're really thankful for their partnership, and although it's only been 2 years, we technically exited the program a couple years ago, but here we are today. They've been to all of our events. Every time we have something major going on, they show up, they're supporting us along the way, and they've been a wonderful resource, so we're really thankful for that.
So I'm going to jump in here now and talk more about that process, about the process of visioning and planning that we engaged here at Chartiers Valley. At ICAM, we really believe strongly that it's not about talking, we don't want to start the conversation about architecture. We'll get there, certainly. We want to start the conversation about kids and how kids learn. How do we learn? And it's not until we have a really good understanding about that we can really start to inform how architecture can respond to that and play a role, hopefully positively, in that experience for them. And so we developed a pretty robust plan for the district to go through. We actually, and we'll talk about the schedule in a minute, but we really, we had 2 projects in one here, which was really great as an architect to get to design 2 schools at the same time. for one client, but we really knew there were different stakeholder groups involved in both of those. And so we needed to engage both of those individually, and then we needed to find ways to bring them together. So for the middle school, we had what we called an SSTAT team, a middle school SSTAT team, which was a school design advisory team, and we had a high school SSTAT team. Those are about 20 to 25 people each, so 50 people total. That's an incredible investment of time and resources, because for every teacher that gets to sit down with me at 2 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, that's a substitute teacher that the district is investing in. And so we really do understand that commitment, we understand that investment, and we really appreciate the district's commitment to working through the process in a very thoughtful and a committed way. To that end, transparency was critical. We were soaking up a lot of those resources. We were in a room, we were having really incredible conversations about the kinds of learning, and we'll talk about some of those and how the building could play a role in this educational process. But we needed to really focus on sharing that information out, not keeping that information to ourselves. And as part of that, the makeup of those SSTAT teams was incredibly important. We needed to put people in place that were change makers throughout the district, because while we couldn't meet with every single teacher all at the same time necessarily, we could meet with people that would disseminate that information and really be champions of these initiatives that we were discussing and share those out. And I think Brian made a great example of the Act 34 hearing. That was a really great success. That started with the people that were in the room as part of the SSTAT teams, because there were no surprises when we got to that meeting. People were excited about it already because they knew what we were doing. We weren't hiding. We were doing it out in the open, and there was a lot of magic, I think, involved in that. You want to talk about the schedule a little bit?
Sure. So as Matt mentioned, there was the middle school school design advisory team and the high school school design advisory team. They met individually. They also met together. So the top half is kind of a schedule of their meetings and the topics at each one. I think we sort of touched on the fact that we didn't start with design plans or architecture. We started with really envisioning what learning at Chartiers Valley School District should look like. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. I don't want to get into it too much. But then down here we got into community outreach. So Matt mentioned the importance of keeping the teachers involved and the students who were on these teams, staff and administrators. But in addition, there's the entire community. And in order to get to that Act 34 hearing, which was very positive, the community had to be involved throughout the entire thing. So we had 4 community summits. These were open to the public. Anybody could show up. It was an opportunity to hear from our architects where we are in the process today, where we're going next. It was also an opportunity for community members to ask questions, and they asked some really good questions. And it was also a chance to share feedback. At one point, we even kind of changed the course of where we were headed based on the feedback that we got in those meetings. So it wasn't just a meeting to have a meeting. It was a really important part of the process to ensure that the community felt like they were engaged, they were informed, they had a voice. We cared what they thought, because ultimately, this is their school district. So it was a really positive experience, I think, for everybody to walk through that.
And what's not captured on this diagram is other events that we were involved in when we went to parent-teacher groups, the PTG meetings. In the evenings, we shared out a lot of this information. We were trying to go where people were already going and find them where they were to share out a lot of this information. We went to all 4 bureaus in their planning, commissioning meetings that were not specific to our project. We just came to introduce ourselves as the team, the SSTAT teams, and talk about the process that was there. And so it was a very holistic approach to this transparency that we thought was vital to the success of this project.
How many individuals from the public did you have on each team?
We had 3 community members, not called teachers, on each, and their participation varied. They weren't able to come to every meeting, but they were there. I think we had 6 students on each team, and the rest was filled out with administrators and teachers. So.
And were those selected, or people submitted their interest in attending those, and how did you choose?
Yeah, so actually, I mentioned the strategic planning event that we had in the first, and that was open to the whole community. And then we took people who came to there and were really interested. So a lot of the people who ended up serving on the school design advisory teams had attended that first meeting and taken an interest in where we were going and how we were moving forward. So that's how they were chosen to be a part of the process. But again, these were people who also have full-time jobs, so they couldn't necessarily take a vacation day every time we were having 20 meetings, but they did make a good portion of it, and then they were always updated after too.
But yeah.
Was there a current or an undercurrent of opposition throughout this entire process, or was pretty much the community involved in a positive way from the get-go, or was that opposition something you had to work with along the way?
I don't know that there was opposition. There was skepticism. That was with the teachers as well as the community, because as you can see, we started in August and we didn't wrap up the planning and visioning session until January. And we really didn't design anything until maybe November, December. And so we were having these meetings, September, October. We were talking to them. We were talking about education and learning and a lot of different concepts and a lot of different trends in education. And the whole time, I think a lot of the teachers and a lot of the SDAT members and community members thought we still had the plans in a drawer back at the office. That we were working we're doing this, we're having this conversation. This is great, but we're really doing it over here, and we're just waiting for the moment to unveil these plans. And here's your school that may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about. And it wasn't until I think the first set of plans came out. They kept bugging us. They're like, when are we going to see? What does this look like? We're sick of talking to you. Show us a floor plan or some diagram or something, right? And we didn't have anything to show them for a long time. And so when we finally put it out there, and it was actually not even a full floor plan. It was actually a model of a small learning community. And when it looked like what they did, and they saw that their input was right there in front of them, and that was really cherished and something that was important to the design process, then they kind of got it. And then once we had that momentum, we were rolling. But there was some skepticism, certainly. Yeah.
Do you think that there may not have been any undercurrent of opposition, because it's my understanding at least that in your district you've not had to raise taxes a lot in the most recent history, so you might have had a lot more if you were in a district that has had to raise taxes a lot? I mean, am I accurate on that you have not had to raise taxes?
That is true, and that was something we definitely had going for us in the lead up to this. And quite frankly, at some of the community summits, we had community members show up who don't have students in the district and don't necessarily care what the school looks like, but they are worried about how will this impact taxes. It's a reality that we all face as school districts. But I think when it came down to it and they learned why we needed to do that, and Dr. White touched on it a little bit, that the buildings were just not meeting our needs and literally failing around us. And then when they talked about how this could impact learning and how important the environment is to our educators and our learners at Chartiers Valley, and knowing that they're a part of the process and informed along the way, I think any of our naysayers turned right around. They were... Yeah,
but I do think there was still some skepticism even with that. People didn't necessarily believe that we weren't going to raise taxes. Everyone was saying that we're not going to raise it, but you're just going to wait a couple of years before you raise taxes kind of thing. That was kind of always out there. But was one of the things that stood out to me at the Act 34 hearing was a community member stood up and went to the podium, and I'd never seen him before. He hadn't been a part of any of our community summits. He was a new individual for I think a lot of us. And he introduced himself as someone who's involved in very sizable investment banking. He's doing deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars daily. True or not, I don't know. Never met him. But he said, what I've heard today gives me the trust in you that an $80 million project is the right thing for us to do. And it's an investment in kids. And he was all for it. And to hear his background and to hear where he was coming from, and he was giving us his blessing, essentially. And when we didn't ask for it, he just offered that to us, was pretty powerful. And he was talking to the district at that point. He wasn't talking to architects or builders. He was talking to the district and the way they organized it.
So in that hearing, you were able to actually state that you can do all this construction, and based on your projections, you will not have to raise taxes?
That's kind of the essence of that Act 34 hearing, is to put the cards out on the table financially in terms of how you're going to pay for this, the bonding process, the different kinds of financing details that are part of the total plan. And it may have been the first time that anyone heard the full project cost of approaching $90 million. So While we were transparent with a lot of things, that number was kind of bounced around internally, but not a publicly known thing until kind of later in the game. But
you're able to do it, you think, without raising taxes for the future also?
So yeah, the project in the 90 million is accounted for, and yes, that's great. We also have to take into consideration, as many of you are school districts in the area, the cost of the pension pressures and all of that. So ultimately, we did end up having to raise taxes at this last budget meeting. And it's really unfortunate because it wasn't about the construction project, but public perception may have been that way. But we were very clear about the factors that were attributing to the need to raise taxes, and the fact that we hadn't raised taxes in so long, and where we are in the scale of other districts in the area. So
yeah, I think at the time that we presented at the Act 34 hearing, we were the second lowest in Allegheny County in terms of millage rate.
that is correct, and
accurate?
now we're the lowest still. So, but it was a reality, and you got, as you know, we have other things to consider in that budget.
So one of the things that we talked about in this, back to the SSTAT meetings, and some of the conversations that we had was really back to learning and how kids learn, and understanding that there are multiple intelligences out there and that kids learn differently. One of the things that we talked about was that a lot of schools designed in the 1940s were designed on this mass production model, right? We had the baby boomers, we had the wars coming to an end, we had a lot of kids that needed to be educated in a rapid way. And so this mass production model was right there. You get the kids in one end, you get them out the other end, ready for their job in the factory or maybe college, not necessarily. And we were looking at maybe a 70% success rate. That was pretty good and pretty acceptable, not bad. A lot of educators in the room, that doesn't fly today. 100% success rate is the only thing that we talk about anymore. And so if we're going to get there, and maybe that's achievable, maybe it's not, but we really need to understand the kids that are part of that equation and how they're going to learn. And only when we understand that, and only when we have conversations around that, can we start to create environments for that education to take place in. In addition to those intelligences, we know there's at least 20 learning modalities, probably more. Kids learn in very different ways. I was always a hands-on learner. I needed to do things with my hands. I needed project-based learning. Otherwise, it was going in one ear and out the other. There are kids out there that are kinetic learners. They need to be, even a rocking chair will help them absorb information so much more effectively than sitting in chairs listening to people like me with a remote control in their hand. That's not for everybody. And so it's not until we understand that we can really start to put space together that's going to address all of these different needs and adjacencies of space. And we want to talk about flexibility, but how does flexibility enhance this kind of thing and not get in the way of it? And we wanted, as Andrew said beautifully, this was a once-in-a-generation opportunity for this district. Let's get it right. And you saw the schedule that was 6 months before anything was really designed. That's the kind of commitment that this district had to getting it right before we put any shovels in the ground.
So as Matt said, understanding the learning modalities and truly what type of environment we wanted to give to our teachers and our students at Chartiers Valley, we had a theory of what we thought might work, and it was really different than our schools had been in the past. They use a term called cells and bells, which is, you walk down a hallway and you have classrooms on either side, and that's pretty much the model around here. If you take away our school colors or our logo, and most schools you'll see a hallway and doors with classrooms. So to think outside of that was a little bit different and a little bit scary. So we wanted to make sure if we were going to do something so different, it actually works in reality. So we had our theory, and we ended up going on study tours, and we actually went down to the DC and Baltimore area, specifically to see schools who had set themselves up a little bit differently and to find out from them and see firsthand by talking to students and teachers what was working and maybe what wasn't. So, as I said, we went on the study tours, visited 4 different schools in that area, and did really intense research and evaluation and discussion on what we saw, what we liked, what seemed to be enhancing learning, what maybe was not working quite so much, and also hearing from teachers and students about what they loved about their school setup and what, quite frankly, wasn't working. So that was really helpful in guiding our decision. In addition, we did a few virtual tours to talk about more contemporary learning environments. One thing that we had been tossing around the idea of the L-shaped classrooms. So if you're not familiar with that, it is pretty much exactly like it sounds, a classroom where you have a little part that sticks out on the end, making an L shape, and that really, it affords the opportunity to do full group instruction. It also enables a small group to break off into that little section that's off to the side. It is a great model for inclusion and bringing some of your special ed students back into the classroom. It has a lot of benefits. So that was one thing that we were thinking, in theory, could possibly be great here for Chartiers Valley, but we wanted to see those things in action.
And it was important, I think, from the design team's perspective, to not come in with an agenda, to not come in and say, you need to think about L-shaped classrooms. So the way we achieved that, we actually broke the STETs up into two groups. We gave them white papers on the benefits, on what is good about L-shaped classroom, and then also gave them white papers on what's great about a rectangular or square classroom. And we made them battle it out, and it was great. We learned a lot from both of them, and ultimately the L-shaped classroom won for that particular group, but it's not something that's right for every school, every district. It is really something that's a personal decision.
And so I think that, again, goes back to the process and the research and the time investment in figuring out what works for you and for your individual communities. So again, this just was kind of the end of the school visitations in the contemporary learning environments, and what we ended up gaining was that the L-shaped classrooms we thought would be beneficial to us, but also the setup of learning towers or learning commons where the walls are a little bit flexible and can move around, and the furniture is flexible and you can set it up. We had this actually set up like a lecture hall. A few minutes before the presentation started, we decided tables might be more effective. So the ability to quickly shift from one to the other hopefully can enable teachers to shift the type of learning they're doing in their classroom really quickly. It also gives two classes the chance to join together and work together. There are spaces within there for small groups to break off. So that was kind of what we were trying to see and figure out if that was actually going to be right for us. Anything to add to that?
Another big exercise that Andrew mentioned was our guiding principles. And these were the 9 that were defined by the STAT committees. We had them work in separate groups at first to define what the guiding principles of each individual school was. And then at one of the points where we came together as one large team, we really filtered those through a lot of different conversations and really landed on these 9. There's some debate as to whether these are in order or not, but they're all very important. And what these become are really the litmus test to help us with decision making, because construction projects are just fraught with decisions to make. There's millions and millions of decisions, and we needed something to kind of keep us on track. We had done great work. We had bonded as a team. We had really discovered a different way of teaching and a different way for kids to be affected by architecture and the framework of a classroom. But we wanted to make sure that we had these things that would last the span of the project. Number one, and I do believe this was ranked number 1, was that we wanted to turn this into a learner-focused campus. That's tough to do when you have a room primarily with teachers in it that are working on this, but it was finding the right teachers that could really embrace that. And honestly, they're not waiting for me in the new school. They're doing this right now, which is really pretty great. But they wanted to flip the script and make this into a learner-focused campus that was really about students and not about teachers. That's a tough thing to do because that's a cultural change. That almost has nothing to do with the building. And so here again we are, architects facilitating a conversation that has almost nothing to do with architecture. We wanted this to be a safe environment. That came up in every community summit that we had. How are we going to keep these kids safe? There were incidents all over the news with school shootings and everything that needed to be addressed, and we needed to make sure we were honoring those requests and those influences certainly throughout. We needed the school to be flexible and agile. We don't know how education is going to change, but we know that it's not going to be the same in 5 years as it is right now. That's the constant. Change is the constant, right? And so while we can't necessarily look into our crystal ball and predict what's going to happen with education and where it's going to go, we can certainly create a building that can adjust and be agile to that change. One of the techniques that we did with this was we did a wall permanence analysis, where once we kind of came up with a floor plan and we understood where walls wanted to be and different spaces needed to be, we took a look at where those walls were, and we said, what needs to be a 20-year wall, what needs to be a 10-year wall, and what needs to be a 5-year wall. A 5-year wall is studs and drywall. There's nothing in, there's no plumbing, there's maybe a little bit of electric, but almost nothing in that wall, and we can tear it down tomorrow if we had to, and not really affect anything else. A 10-year wall, maybe there were a few more electrical outlets, maybe a plumbing riser that would have to be addressed, or some air distribution, something like that. But again, not really integral to the integrity of the building. And then there were the 20-year walls, and those things were the ones that probably will never change throughout the life of the building. And our goal was to minimize the 20-year wall and maximize the 5-year wall. We visited, one of the school tours that we visited was Berry School in Washington, D.C. And it was a different kind of school because it was built on the platform of modular buildings. So they had a very restricted footprint that they could build on. And they decided early on that they weren't going to put any bearing walls in the interior of the building. The only thing carrying the structure was going to be on the perimeter, which gave them complete flexibility of breaking the space up internally as they saw fit. And so that was the extreme version. We were obviously building a much bigger school than what they had, but the concept was there, and the SSTAT teams really embraced that and said, we need to do that as much as we possibly can. So that was huge. We wanted to be the heart of the community, and I think this goes to a lot of what Andrew was saying with being an example. We wanted this building to really set the tone for how the community would come together, and we had those 4 different communities. This is the one place that they all intersect at any given time, and we wanted to make sure we honored that. Promoting meaningful collaboration. Again, this is about the space, the flexibility that we had built into the school. Honoring the diversity and history of the community, recognizing those 4 different boroughs and how they all come together and the different personalities and characteristics of each, and how could we build that into the project. We wanted to be a model campus for stewardship, so it didn't get till number 7 until that came up. So as Andrew said, we're not a LEED, we're not going after any sort of LEED certification or accreditation, but we have an incredible commitment to sustainability and building performance, and I think those things go hand in hand many times, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Technology was certainly something that was important, not only today, but how are we able to adapt and be agile to the technology that we don't even know exists yet. And we wanted to encourage total wellness, and that was a big community value that we wanted to embrace. Oh, I need to go back, sorry.
No, that's okay. So you're about to just watch a quick video clip. This is one of our students. He actually graduated last May, but his name is Nick May, and he's since moved on to Georgia Tech. But he was a student who was on the SSTAT team, so he's going to talk a little bit about what he took away from the experience.
And then specifically on some of the ones that I thought were really, really good at that. Obviously, the guiding principles that we did at the beginning. So we spent a lot of time on that, working on the principles, drawing them out, posting them on the board or on the wall, talking about them, things like that. That was huge, I thought, because that really gave all of us a chance to almost create a definition for what this new school should represent. And so now when people ask why is a new school necessary, you've got this whole list of different things where you're like, this is why we talked about this and this makes sense to us. So I thought that was really effective. It certainly worked on me. I felt like I was owning it.
Okay, so I think Nick actually summed up the reason those guiding principles are so important pretty well. Once they had those, again, it's coming back to communication and transparency. So we had our community summits where we invited everybody to come down, hear from the architects, ask their questions, share their feedback. That's great. Unfortunately, even though we had a fairly decent turnout at some of those summits, that is not the entire community by any means. So we had to figure out other ways to reach the public who might not be able to come down on a Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever evening and meet with us face to face. So like Matt said, we went to our open houses trying to reach parents. We went to PTG meetings trying to reach parents. We went to our township council meetings trying to reach members of our community there. We went to athletic events, and then we used our website, we used Facebook and Twitter, and we used the media actually to make sure that everybody was informed. This was happening, here's the process. Please get involved or stay informed if you wish to do so. You know, I posted a summary of every community forum on the website so the people who weren't there could read what happened and see the progress for themselves and decide whether the next one would be an event they wanted to attend or not. We invited people to these things via social media, via our big electronic sign that is no longer there because it came down in construction, but at the time was a way to reach people driving on campus to say, hey, if you're around, stop in and learn what's going on, be involved, and have a say in it. So again, I think it just comes back to process and involvement and transparency.
Does your community use your buildings? I mean, you give out permits for gyms and auditoriums,
Oh,
dance
yes.
studios, everything.
Oh, yes.
So did they have any issues with the stuff that you decided to do? I mean, when we come to the community, did they have input into that?
They did. Actually, we had a lot of different groups that, a lot of dance groups used the auditorium is one example. We actually had real estate agents come in to talk to us because they're out trying to sell homes in Chartiers Valley, right? And so they wanted to know what we were doing because that was going to be part of the conversation that they were having, certainly with some of their clients. But the auditorium was a big use. We did talk to the athletic department and a lot of the different internal community leagues that were going to be utilizing the gym. They wanted to make sure they were still going to have access. That was a lot of their interest when they came to those meetings. And so we could talk about the phasing and some of the process as this is a kind of a 4-year project. There are going to be times when it is available, times when it's not. We'll walk into the auditorium and you'll see right now we're not renting that space out right now. It's under construction. But what's also one of the first phases that we decided to do so that we could get it back online and being back to being an asset for the community. But the school has a rich history of being a huge asset for the community, and it's highly utilized.
And the other thing is we're trying to be flexible. We're asking our community to be flexible, but in addition, we're trying to help them out wherever we can. So that, like you said, the auditorium is one of our most trafficked areas, and we're fortunate that one of our elementary schools has a full-size auditorium that we can use for other events, whether they're school-related or renting it out to the community during the construction. So just trying to be a little bit flexible and get creative in how we're using our different resources.
You just mentioned real estate companies
Yes.
coming in. So obviously you guys did a population or a future enrollment study. How did that play into the overall design? The sizes and the spaces?
Yeah.
And were the numbers alarming one way or the other based on the results that you were
So we didn't do the demographic study as part of our scope of work. There was a master plan and feasibility study that was done before we came on board as the design architects. But what was discovered as part of that process, the district certainly went through that process, and they discovered that the population growth was pretty stale, pretty even. I don't want to say stale, but there are people moving into the area, but there's also people moving out of the area. There's not a big influx. Our student population today might go up by 10 in 10 years, something like that. The numbers were pretty modest and pretty conservative.
With that said, though, we did want to build a building that, you know, would be capable of housing more students should we get an influx of families moving in with school-age children. So we can talk about the way the learning commons are designed. They have offices within there for teachers so that the classrooms can be used by more than one teacher throughout the day. Am I jumping ahead?
No, you're not. I mean, it's really getting to the next slide where we're talking about redefining learning environments. And this is really the shift from a teacher-focused campus to a learner-focused campus. So one of the great things about teachers is that they have stuff. And they love their stuff, and they collect their stuff because they almost never move their location. They stay in a classroom for 20 years, and if you walk into any classroom, you will see 20 years worth of collections on their walls. And so we call that nesting. Teachers love to nest. What a learner-focused campus does is we say, we get that, but the kids are more important. So if we need to put more kids in this building, you, teacher, need to be more flexible with your stuff. And maybe you just get a cart, and it's more of a academic approach, a higher education approach, a university model, if you will, where the teacher comes to the room The room doesn't just exist for the teacher. And the kids certainly move, but the teachers move too. And that was a really tough thing. It was a tough conversation. And as soon as that was introduced, man, it spread like wildfire. And the teachers were like, we're all losing our rooms. We got to get all this stuff off our walls. It was a disaster in the making. It was never something that was necessary today. And so we had to be clear about that. And we spent a week living in the school, talking to teachers, talking to students to really explain what that meant to their reality. But that was again, that's the cultural shift. It seems like as many teachers as you have in a district, you have the same number of coffee pots and the same number of stereos, and they all have their stuff that they want to have their place. And that's important though. They need to have their place, but can that be, as Kara said, in an office instead of an entire classroom? And that allows our efficiency calculation for that space to really be increased, and we can add almost 600 students if we wanted to, just by using the school in a different way, in a more efficient way. That's a big number, right? But that's when that transient thing comes into play. Yeah?
Did you redefine the storage environment as well?
Yeah.
So was there a concept in that where you shifted the teachers' expectations for storage?
So we set the table for that. We're not in a situation where we have to do that. This is the growth that Kara talked about. We wanted to accommodate and plan for growth without necessarily having to introduce it today. So all of the classrooms have a lot of storage. We have what we call the learning wall, which has some sliding whiteboards, has some technology up at the front, and certainly has some storage amenities with it. But we also have office. We broke the school down into learning communities where we have 5 classrooms around 1 learning commons. And each of those communities has an office space for the teachers specifically. So when the day comes that space will be used as the home base, the touchdown point for the teacher, and their classroom will not be that thing right now. It's not a philosophy that's going to be put in place on day one, but it's out there and it's something that we're preparing for. Culture is a tough change to make, and so it's a slow process, certainly. Yes?
So I understand how not building as many classrooms might reallocate funding towards other things that are for students, but is there other impacts when you're saying that it's a learner-driven as opposed to teacher-driven? Are there other things specifically to that learning community or to the teachers not being in a homeroom that benefit the students?
Yes. I don't know if it's specific to the office function, but we believe there's an incredible benefit to learning by having these small communities. The human psyche can really accept about 120 to 150 meaningful relationships at any given time. That's how many people you can know and know well. Anything more than that, it's just a face in the crowd. There's studies that have decided that that's kind of the magic number, the threshold. And so in a school of 750 kids in the middle school or 1,200 kids in the high school, you're one of many, and you don't have as many of those connections to be made because you're constantly moving from one place to the other and seeing different teachers. By breaking it down into communities, our students will be spending 60 to 70% of their day within this one community of 5 classrooms. They will be going from this classroom next door to this classroom, not from this classroom across campus to the other classroom.
And this is middle school and high school?
Middle school and high school. So by spending that much time in that community, they will get to know their teachers, and their teachers will get to know them, and they will get to know all of their peers within that community. And we know that when you get to know people, attendance goes up, both from students and teachers. And when attendance goes up with teachers and students, learning goes up. So if we can find ways to make those connections happen in meaningful ways, we can improve education across the board.
So those teachers who are part of that community stay within that community?
That's correct. Which they want to do because that's where their coffee pot is.
Well, no, I guess I'm just wondering how that works with, like, different levels of instruction. Are you segregating students based on where they're at? Like, so how is, you might have one, I'm sorry. That might be who is interjecting.
That's right.
But you might have one teacher or one class that you want to deliver a higher level of instruction. You may not have enough within that community to offer.
Certainly, there are certainly going to be exceptions, and it's much easier to do this model in a middle school environment than you're able to do in a high school environment. You have a lot more electives, you have a lot more things that you need to leave the community for in high school than in the middle school. But no, we believe that the community needs to be cross-disciplinary in its nature. We need to have science with math. We need to have math with English. We need to have humanities mixed in the bunch. And we think that, well, we know that a lot of education doesn't happen in the classroom. It happens when kids leave because they start talking about the things they just heard and they start conversing with that. Between 120 to 150. So, yeah, that's what the studies tell us is the magic number for again, basing it on those meaningful connections, the human psyche's ability to make those connections. That's the trigger point for us. Yeah?
It's part of the same idea that we try to remain intact from year to year to year.
That's a great, yeah, that's coming. That hasn't been discussed yet, but that's something that's certainly possible with this kind of model. The other thing that was important to recognize, when we were transforming the learning environment, right? We didn't have enough time to get wholesale buy-in to this concept. And so we needed to make sure that while we thought this was the right way to do it, and we thought that this was the right way to schedule an educational environment, tomorrow Dr. White might move on. He might move to another opportunity, and somebody else might come in with a completely different idea of how education needs to be delivered. So while our plans are based on a certain model, they're not specific to the certain model. Education can really be delivered in our new school in the exact same way that it's being delivered today without having that community environment. You can still go from the first floor to the fourth floor if you want to for your classes. We're not saying you have to do one way or the other. But because we're organizing in this way, we provide the opportunity to do something in a very different way. You can't do the learning community concept in a cells and bells educational model. And that was the big win, that we got them to buy into at least that, and there's a lot more to come. The bell schedule was a huge part of the discussion. Again, we're architects, right? We're talking about school schedules, academic schedules. There's 9 periods, 43 minutes in each period. Is that enough time to make a connection? Is that enough time to deliver a message and for a kid to really retain it? These were questions that we had incredible conversations about, and we didn't solve them all, but we understood where they were getting to, what the basis of their thought was, and we needed to make sure we addressed it from an architectural standpoint. So the schedule today hasn't changed, but I think there's a lot of things in the works to change it as we move into these new environments.
It's a growing process, and like we said, we started with no idea in mind, and here's where we are today. And a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, continue to grow. But yeah, shifting culture, as you all know, doesn't happen like that. So it's a work in progress.
We want to make sure we get out before it's dark because we don't have lights everywhere. So I'm going to breeze through some of these things, but this is great conversation. I'm glad you guys are asking questions because I would much prefer a conversation than a presentation. I think Kara's the same way. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the tools of how we came up with the communities, these small learning communities, these charrettes. Some important pieces, some tools: colored paper, scissors, and tape. We came with craft supplies to a lot of these meetings, and we handed them to the teachers, these kits, and we said, you decide. Here are all the pieces of a school. You decide what needs to be in a community. We've talked about the community concept, but we're not going to tell you what needs to be in there. Is there 5 completely generic classrooms? Is there a science classroom with the community? Is there a community of just sciences? And forget the cross-disciplinary thing. Do we have different kinds of classrooms do we have an English community? Do we have a math community? Do we have a science community? We gave, again, no agenda. We gave them the tools. They had small breakout groups where they had these discussions, and they produced, in each SDAC team, they produced 4 different models of small learning communities, all different, all unique. And we pinned them up on the wall, and we made them defend their choices. They made decisions by using tape. It was all loose and flow, very low-tech stuff, right? But when they taped something down, they were saying, that's where this needs to be. It needs to be next to this. This is what we need to include. Is an outdoor learning classroom part of the community? Is that important to us? To some groups it was, to some it wasn't. And then the magic happened when we got together and we talked about why we made those decisions. And again, this was the students. This was the community members. These were the teachers doing these things. Architects just made sure no one stabbed themselves with the scissors or got tape over their eyes or something like that. We just kind of stood back and let the stuff happen. Once we came up with those learning communities, we started putting them together as puzzle pieces to create the school. Again, this is not the architect leading the show. This is the architect stepping back and saying, you put it together the way you want. We're going to make sure you don't do anything that we can't build or that isn't pragmatic or it doesn't make sense. But we really want to understand where this SSTAT team is coming from with how they want to organize these schools. And so these puzzle piece schools that were they even decided on the fly to stack them up because there wasn't enough room to spread it out across the entire site. This is what they came up with. This is the high school. And as architects, we turned it into something that could be built. My kids go here. I'm a community member. And a lot of people say, what a great opportunity. You get to design your kids' school. That's awesome. But I didn't. And I think that's what's really great about this process is I was there. I was certainly part of the conversation. But this community designed these schools. And I think there's, again, back to the Act 34 hearing where we got a lot of vocal support. It's because of their role in that equation that we had success. So.
You know, the other thing that I just want to interject too, because in other districts around the area, you could do the exact same process, have the same number of meetings, have the same types of people in on your conversations, and come up with a completely different look for your building and your school. And that's perfect because that means your school would meet the needs of your community. And so it is really individualized. And I think the process is the important part to get you where you need to be as a community.
So real quick, and I think this will tell you all you need to know about these colored floor plans that are all over the place. These are each identical small learning communities. We have science in the corner. They are connected by a common prep space because they really wanted to be together. They wanted to be connected, but we wanted them to be broken apart, to be part of a greater whole in a larger community. So we put the science in the corner. We don't have a lot of hallways, we don't have a lot of corridors, so we don't have a lot of place to put lockers, and we think that's a good thing. We gathered them together, we call this the home base. If I'm gonna spend 60 to 70% of my day here, this is where I want my stuff. So I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna drop my bag in my locker, and I'm gonna go to class. And I'm gonna go from this class to this class to this class to this class. I'm not gonna go out here and out here, unless I have an elective. So that's really the organizational component of both schools, and they're identical in their nature. The learning communities have different characteristics, certainly, but they're organized in very similar ways. Each community has their own bathroom. You see the office for the teachers. We have outdoor learning as part of the ground floor learning communities. We had them on every floor as terraces. We ended up taking those off because, again, we put it back to the teachers. We said, this is something that's going to cost money. These aren't free. All of these outdoor learning spaces, you need to justify how you would use them for us to keep them. And the more discussions we had, the more we realized that we really didn't have a plan for these spaces, so we needed to minimize the resources that we were devoting to that particular thing and put it in other spaces. Lots of transparency, and that all of these classrooms are surrounding a learning commons that has a large open space. It has what we call the cafe area, which we like the concept of food all day. That's a healthy school initiative that we really want to provide the opportunity for. And we also have small learning groups, breakout space for these small project areas. I talked about the L-shaped classroom that has a lot of great advantages. And then transparency in between all of these spaces was a huge focus of our design concept. I do that again.
One more introduction.
Right?
So
yeah.
Next you'll hear Mr. Welding. He is currently our digital media specialist. Before that, he was an English teacher at the high school, and so this is actually his space now, this room. But he was also part of the school design advisory team, and he's going to tell you.
And learn from the mistakes that we've made, and learn from our triumphs, and kind of, start all over again and kind of stitch this new thing together, which is a really, really cool opportunity. And to all come together and do that instead of, someone else kind of deciding what we're going to do and kind of put us in these round pegs, but, we're square and kind of try to fit us all into that. No, we got to make the decision. The people in the trenches got to put our say into this, which is such a unique experience. And so it started a transformation already, which is great because the transformation doesn't start the minute that the new building is in operation. It starts now.
And this is what we came up with. want to close with a video that I think puts this all into motion. Some of you may have seen it already. It's on our website and a lot of other areas in the school district's website. But this entire process was captured in this book. Again, we recognize the investment that the district made in this effort, and we wanted to really capture it in a way that it couldn't go away, that it was going to be something that we could refer back to, that when questions came from the community that said, why are we doing this way? The answers are here. The guiding principles are all explained in detail here. The concept around the small learning community is in this book, and the process that it took to get there is all captured in a document that's at the public library, the community library. It's available at the district office. It's available in a lot of different areas. I think there's even a digital form on the website that we captured because we think it's important to communicate these ideas and why we decided to do things the way we did. Rightly or wrongly, at least you understood the background and the thinking that went behind it. I have some copies of this if you're interested in it. If I run out, just give me your card. I'll be happy to send you additional copies. But this is something that I think we're proud of. I believe the district's proud of it because it really was a joint effort between the design team and the district in producing something that we think will serve the community for many, many years to come. So I'm going to exit out of this. I know we need to get outside, so I'm just going to pop this up real quick and share with you the overall development of the project.
Does the process end with the built facility, or is there an element of follow-through?
I don't believe it will. I think that there's still change that's going to be taking place all through, but probably more cultural than architecture at this point. I think that the district is going to have to learn how to use some of these spaces. They've actually already taken steps. They're reaching back out to the schools that have some of these characteristics, and they're talking to the staff that use the kinds of spaces that are being built right now, trying to anticipate how those spaces can be used when we get to move into them. So I think there are certainly going to be some adjustments, some things we're going to be discovered that we're going to have to do things differently in the district. So yeah, I think the change will be continual. I hope it's continual. I hope that these buildings will be used in ways that I never expected them to be used, and the district leadership probably never expected them to be used. Teachers are really creative people, and they can do a lot with a little, and I can't wait to see what they do with a lot. I think that'll be pretty magical. So, all right, I'm gonna kick this. We decided that because construction is such a messy thing, that we really needed to provide that light at the end of the tunnel for the community to understand what it was all about, what it's all for, and what we're headed towards in a little bit of a cinematic way. So thank you very much for coming. I think we want to get outside as quickly as we can. I think we're going to start in the new tech ed at the high school, and we'll work our way to the auditorium. Those are the areas that we have the most construction taking place, and you can start to see some of the spaces taking shape.